Welcome to everyone tuning in. Thank you for joining us today. My name is Reegan Rae. I am the co-CEO at Arnerich Massena. We are a Portland-based investment advisory firm bringing our unique and disciplined process to private clients as well as nonprofit endowments and foundations. Today, I am here with a special guest, Serilda Summers-McGee, to honor and celebrate Women's History Month. This year, the theme for Women's History Month, as determined by the National Women's History Alliance, is Women Who Advocate for Equity, Diversity, and Inclusion. And I could not think of a better individual to shed insight and inspiration related to that topic than my friend, Serilda. She is the founder and CEO of Workplace Change, which creates custom HR solutions and strategies for the best work environments and HR practices, and by embedding diversity, equity, and inclusion within every HR service. So personally for me, as a female executive in a very male-dominated field of financial services, I am passionate about the issues of diversity and inclusion, and I'm proud of the work that Arnerich Massena has done to incorporate it into our own office and culture, as well as our processes and how we work with managers and our vendors. With that being said, I'm so excited to learn more about Serilda's story, her insights on the topic, and the latest from her industry, and to share with our listeners today. So what a great way to illuminate this year's Women's History Month theme. Serilda, thank you so much for being here today.
Thanks for having me, Reegan. Happy to be here.
Awesome. Well, let's jump right in. Why don't we start? Give us a quick bit of background on you. Share your history, your experience, and how you ultimately came to start your company, Workplace Change.
Right on. Well, number one, again, I'm excited to be here with you today and to talk about a topic as important as diversity, equity, and inclusion, because it's been a bit of a roller coaster ride as it pertains to DEI in the workplace, but also just kind of like in society. Mm-hmm. So a bit about myself. I'm originally from Michigan. I came to Oregon by way of Indiana. And what brought me to Oregon was a job at Reed College. I was the dean of housing there, reporting into the dean of students, and I had aspirations of becoming a dean of students. So after working with the same population of folks between the ages of 17 and 21, I just got burned out, right? Mm. Like, I can't deal with one more calamity that my boyfriend left me. It's like, okay, we've got to press the refresh button and take the career in a different direction. Mm. And so I went to Willamette University, located in Oregon, where I got my second master's degree, which was an MBA. And I really wasn't sure what I was going to do. My undergraduate degree is in biology. And so I thought I'd go into finance because math was always my jam. But I fell in love with human resources. Human resources was like this perfect nexus of people, like helping them actualize their dreams and having conversations with them, and also engaging with usually the most expensive asset inside any organization, unless you're like PGE and you own the poles and the wires of the electricity. Human capital is very expensive for organizations. So it's like, okay, I can have both this kind of like huge impact on business from a culture and people standpoint, while concurrently helping people realize their dreams and their goals, which is why I went into higher education to begin with. And that began my journey. I had a huge career change, got a job at the Portland Business Alliance, now called the Portland Metro Chamber. I think that's the new name. I could be wrong. But Sandy McDonough gave me my first big break in human resources. Jill Island at Intel is who introduced me to Sandy. And I mean, I was a baby HR pro. From there, I went to Kaiser Permanente as a middle manager in human resources. I then got picked up by the state of Oregon, where by Governor Kitzhaber's team to lead human resources in the Oregon Department of Education. And while in the state of Oregon, I met Treasurer Ted Wheeler, who then became Mayor Ted Wheeler. And then he said, hey, love what you did at the state. We'd love to see you come and do it at the city, which really helped to crystallize my credibility and presence in the human resources field, because Portland is the biggest stage you can be on as an HR professional. Not the best paid, stage, but definitely the most eyes on you and the impact that you're having to an entire ecosystem. So I did that until 2019. And then after 2019, I stepped into my own company. I founded it in 2016 while holding a full-time job and being a mom of two and a wife. I launched my company. It took a lot of work, but then I got it to a certain size financially where I could step out and do workplace change full-time. And that's what I did in 2019. So now we're working with, in 2023, we worked with over 100 companies doing human resources and diversity, equity, and inclusion work, predominantly human resources, where we then leverage diversity, equity, and inclusion tenets throughout all traditional HR functions. So employee relations, labor relations, we were at a lot of negotiation tables, classification and compensation work, training and development, recruitment. All of those things are the foundations of human resources, but we just overlay diversity, equity, and inclusion tenets and best practices into those functions. And we've been doing it ever since and growing like wildflowers ever since as well.
Wow, what a fascinating history. I love that you said, what is the most precious asset within companies, and the fact that it's your human capital, it's your people. I think that is so, so true. And what amazing companies that you've had the opportunity to work with, both in the private sector, the for-profit sector, the nonprofit sector. Do you prefer working with one type of an organization over another? Do you really feel like there's a niche, or do you specialize in one area, or do they all sort of need the same types of work?
What's really interesting is that every single industry believes that they are completely unique and original in every possible way from every other industry. And here's the thing. Human beings are human beings are human beings. If you put two people in a room together for a certain period of time, they're going to fight at some point in time. Someone is going to irk another person. Like someone's going to feel disrespected by another person or feel like unheard or not responded to. The people issues are the same from industry to industry, sector to sector. Truly, the biggest disruptor that happened in side companies as of late, and I've been doing this for nearly 20 years, the only thing that has been a true disruptor from industry to industry, and I mean from healthcare to higher education or academia to the K-12 system to the folks who are doing technology, coders, government, all the things were the exact same. True. The biggest disruptor was COVID.
Yeah.
And COVID interrupted different industries in different ways, in a way that I had never seen before. And then when we were coming out of COVID, that was even more disruptive, in my opinion, because everybody kind of stopped and was sheltering in place and having the same experience at the same time. But the recall to the office and how people did it, it was different from ecosystem to ecosystem, from week to week, month to month. And so that was more disruptive than just, industry specific things. So I would say that there is more in common from industry to industry than uncommon, because in my field, because we're all human beings, we all have emotions. Some of us are more emotional than others. I usually only take on a couple nonprofit clients at once. They can be very high feeling. That's and that can it's a lot of energy you have to put in to kind of just like carry the weight of all the emotions that are in the room concurrently. And so that can burn my team down. So we are really thoughtful about the kinds of ecosystems we go in and the kinds of work we take on concurrently. So to make sure that we don't burn ourselves out. And it's actually something that we are modeling for and educating social workers on, as well as people who are supplying services to the homelessness community. Imagine coming into work and people are misgendering you every day, or, throwing poo at you. Like there are things that happen to you that can just kind of just become a burden and just make you smaller and more stressed and overwhelmed. And so you gotta learn how to modulate a bit. But yeah, the ecosystem, man, it's people.
It's people. That's right. Well, I think it's a good segue into our next question. So I think it's fascinating hearing, big disruptor, across any industry or culture really was COVID.
Yeah.
And I think what is also interesting at the same time as COVID, diversity, equity, and inclusion kind of got a new spotlight because in that period of time was also the Me Too movement, the George Floyd incidents, the whole Black Lives Matter campaign. And so I'm sure that had to hopefully create more work and more focus and more conversation for workplace change, but also for organizations across the board. So I think my next question is, when you think about the sort of philosophy or Serilda's driving philosophy when it comes to diversity, equity, and inclusion, how would you describe that? And how do you think it fits into today's business environments?
Great question. So Me Too happened 2018. COVID's 2020. Murder of George Floyd is late 2020. What are they calling it? What is it? Reckoning? What they call it? The racial reckoning or whatever.
Social
that happened in
reckoning.
Yeah, that happened 2021, and the civil unrest associated with it. It has just been situation after situation that has required us to really take a strong look at what leadership means, what advocacy means, and what role the workplace plays in all of these societal, social issues that are happening. Because historically, we would say that has no place. Look, I've been in HR and all for a lot of years, right?
Yeah.
We would say that has no place in the workplace. We say that fast, right? And we could tap out of whatever drama was happening all around us, whether it was protest or whether it was, riots or whatever the situation was. We could say, not in the workplace, not here, not between 8 and 5. Gone are the days that you can get away with saying something like that. Now you actually have to kind of express your values to your workforce and then follow suit with your organizational structure and policies, et cetera. So what is my driving philosophy as it pertains to diversity, equity, and inclusion? It's quite simple. Just be fair to me, right? Whoever you are as a person, you should be able to make the statement, just be fair to me. And it makes sense inside your ecosystem and people are responsive to it, right? And that's I'm not saying, folks will say, that sounds like an all lives matter statement, which someone just told someone a couple days ago. And I'm like, what? The situation was an employee told the CEO that they needed the CEO to take a bigger stance on supporting the BIPOC workforce. And she said, hey, absolutely. Every employee who comes in here should be treated with respect and with dignity, like every single person. And they said, that sounds like an all lives matter statement. And I'm like, how is that an all lives matter statement? You're an employer. You are bringing human beings into your ecosystem. Every single one of them should be treated with dignity and respect. And here's the thing that makes it not an all lives matter thing. There are some groups of people who have historically been marginalized, subjugated, not given opportunities, and we just need to be fair to them too, right? And so that's why it's my driving philosophy, because I saw the pendulum swing during the civil unrest that happened, where folks were like, it's our time. Marginalized people, it's our time to disrupt the apple cart. It hasn't been fair to women. It hasn't been fair to non-binary, transgender, and other members of the LGBTQ community. It hasn't been fair to Black people. It hasn't been fair to Latin people. It hasn't been fair. So now it's an opportunity for us to reverse the trend line. So then it became okay to not be fair to able-bodied, cisgender, heterosexual white dudes, right? Let's treat them the way they used to treat us. And it's like, pause, time out. Wait, pause on the play. Did we like being treated that way? Like, was that cool? Did we think that was cool? That our grandmas or, Black and brown uncles and cousins and fathers went into the workplace and got treated terribly day in and day out and wreaked havoc on their health, on their mental health, on their physical safety and well-being? Was that cool then? No, it wasn't. So now that you've gotten some power, you cannot then go and say, now let's terrorize the folks who terrorized us, which was really the energy that folks were putting out on social media. It was happening in the workplace, all around us. And that wasn't cool. So my philosophy, my guiding philosophy is just be fair to us, to him, to her, to them. If you're not going to do it for everybody, then don't do it for one. Life is simple in that way. Right? Be transparent with the opportunities for promotion. If you're not being transparent about it, then what are you hiding? Are you rigging the system? Just be fair to him, her, them, right? Like, just be fair. That's my guiding philosophy. So when I come into an ecosystem, I don't care which group is which. I'm going to try to understand what's happening within the workplace and within the workforce. And then I'm going to call who was wrong and who was right. Where there needs to be enhancements and where there needs to be accountability, and then where things are actually not rigged and people, there's just a trust deficit. Because sometimes I don't trust you, and that makes me believe that everything that you're doing is unfair. But in reality, when we actually look at the numbers, we look at the processes, we look at the policies, we look at the utilization of these different levers that are available to the workforce in the organization, we see that they're being fairly applied, but it doesn't matter because they don't trust you. And they don't trust you because you lied about their bonus 5 years ago, or because you said all lives matter or blue lives matter. And now they think everything about you is suspicious for them. So, I mean, that's really the philosophy that I use. That's the governing tenets that we use at Workplace Change when we go into an organization. And it's been working for us.
Yeah. And it's so easily something easy to remember and pretty straightforward in terms of how it fits, right? So I think that's beautiful. But it's not easy work that you do. No. And I'm sure it takes a while to develop your trust and your rapport with your clients in these businesses. And so as you start to dig into the actual work, what would you say are some of the current issues and challenges that you see out there? And what do you think businesses are, like, where are we at? What are businesses struggling with today?
Yeah. So what are some of the current issues that are out there? I'm actually going to back up a bit because you said I have to earn people's trust. And you're absolutely right. But there are certain things that, because I consider Workplace Change a social science organization, right? We're an anthropological, sociological organization. We're studying people all day, how they integrate with one another, how they work with one another. And so I also recognize this: your gender, your race, the language, whether you have an accent or not, all of those things become biases, right? They fuel biases that people have. And you can tap into those biases to earn trust faster. So if for instance, we have a client that we've been working with for many, many years, and they have a location in Tennessee where the Black workforce and the Latino workforce are fighting aggressively. And they're like, hey, we've seen you do this in Yakima. We've seen you do this in Seattle. We need you to do this, the healing, the restoration, the harmony restoration work that you're doing in Texas. So we immediately sit back and we say, who's the best person to go on that journey to Texas to help to de-escalate the tension and then get them back on track? Somebody Black and somebody Latino. If I bring in two Black people, the Latino folks won't trust me. If I bring in two Latino people from our team, the Black people are not going to trust them. If I bring in two white people, neither group is going to trust them because there's so little trust. And so one of the things that I really think about are the politics associated with the people who walk into the room to try to earn the trust, get them to be open and tell us their truth, and then try to get things back on track. That's one of the many kind of tricks of the trade that we use to try to get people to trust us so that we can quickly de-escalate the tension. The trends that I'm seeing, the current issues that I'm seeing take place right now that are front and center for me, there are two prominent ones that are just like, I'm just in an ocean of them constantly. One is compensation. Everybody wants more money, right? Everybody wants more money. Even if they have been, the COLAs and the cost of living adjustments and the merit increases and the step increases and the bundling of all those things that were happening, people got some amazing increases in compensation between 2021, 2022 to 2023. And so now folks are like, we cannot sustain having our employment costs be so ballooned. Like, it's not on track with our revenue, right? Our profits haven't increased by 30%, but our workforce costs are increasing by 30%. That's just not sustainable. So what we're seeing are a lot of people, and you're also seeing it on play out in the newspaper, like how many collective bargaining sessions, negotiations did we watch go left, right? That led to strikes. Even Portland Public Schools had a
That's
strike.
right. Mm-hmm.
We had the actors have a strike. We had Ford have a strike. Everyone has been striking all around us. And it's been based solely on money. So there's a lot of folks who are coming in and they're saying, hey, this opaque structure that you use to determine how that our compensation, if it is to market, if it is who our comparators are, if we are eligible for additional compensation, like you need to explain that to me as the recipient of the decision that you make based on this data. And that's something that's never been asked of human resources before, right? Folks are saying, I want more money. If you are not increasing my salary at the same cost of inflation, then I'm taking a salary cut. Not true, but these are just some of the things that are on social media that are fueling people to say, I need additional compensation. If I don't get additional compensation, I am going to make your lives a living HE double hockey stick, right? Mm-hmm. So that's one big bucket of area that we've been in, helping people really reimagine the way in which they do compensation and how they communicate and articulate whatever the algorithm is that they're using, right? What is your compensation philosophy? What does it mean to the employee? And then how do you administer it equitably on a day-to-day basis, right?
Right. And so it's really rooted in transparency and communication is what I'm hearing. Yeah.
Absolutely. Just tell people what the process is.
Right.
It's as simple as that, but it just seems so hard to achieve. Mm-hmm. And then the second one, I would say, is just this lack of harmony. Like folks are, there's a major trust deficit between there's a lot of identity politics that's taking shape in the workplace. And then there are people who have these factions, right? The moms who have kids, the white women, the Black women, the brown women, the BIPOC women, right? Leadership versus the workforce versus the men in leadership versus the women in leadership. I mean, just so much separation and very little folks coming together to see, like, under a common mission to just work together and have a major impact on the world and society. And it's quite disruptive, and it's really anxiety and stress provoking. So I see a lot of people who are just at their wits' end, who are deeply stressed out, who are on medicine to manage their anxiety, who feel under attack. Leadership, many people in leadership are feeling like their emotions don't matter, like their feelings don't matter. Like, when did I stop being a human being that you can just call me a racist, or you can call me these other names, or tell me that I should give half of my salary back because I shouldn't make more than 2 times the lowest paid person inside the organization, or whatever thing it is. People are feeling like they can just attack one another and band together and almost like have fellowship, right? Through commiseration, right? Through misery. Like we are building a fortress of misery together, and we're together in this misery.
Misery loves company, right? That's what they say.
Literally. And so we're seeing a lot of that right now. And it's a busy time.
And not to mention just the collective burnout. I know personally, I was so worried about my employees during COVID because everybody was just working so hard remotely without being distracted that I was really worried about burnout. And then you started hearing about the Great Resignation era and the quiet quitting, or silent quitting as they call it, and the burnout and the stress and the anxiety and all those things that you mentioned. And, I, as a leader, I thought a lot during COVID about, when we describe the culture at Arnerich Massena, what people always say is, it's our people, and it's this very caring culture, and it feels like a family. And I really thought, well, how do you keep that kind of a culture going when we're remote for 2 years?
2 years.
And I really thought, is culture still a thing? Are we going to recover from this period of time where we're not together? And do staff value that anymore? And so I think it's really interesting to see organizations like Nike and these other big organizations saying remote work isn't working anymore. They're looking at their revenue and their stock price, and they're doing layoffs, and they're bringing people back together because they're saying that innovation and that mentorship and that leadership isn't able to be cultivated when people aren't together. So, I just wonder, do you think this, bringing people back into the office, you mentioned, it's sort of like we're relearning how to be like kind and give each other grace and be together in workforces again after being, kind of alone and isolated, really, I think, over a period of time.
You're absolutely right. You're absolutely right. Human beings are naturally communal.
Mm-hmm.
Hey, we are pack oriented people. There may be some lone wolves, but the vast majority of us are not lone wolves. We actually do better together, right? Even elderly people, if they don't have community, they don't live as long as people who do have community. I mean, like, all these things are real. So, I was a biologist, but I also hustled in college, and I was a tutor in math and science and, kind of all the STEMmy types of things. And I started to tutor in the prison system, which is fascinating. Okay.
Yeah.
So I tutored in the prison system for about 2 years. Some of the biggest brains that you can imagine are in the prison system. And what I saw was, so there was a process where people who were about to get released from prison, they got into these programs of higher education. They got some tutoring along the way, and then they got released. And then there was a program to help them kind of reacculturate into the society once they were released. I wish the whole country had a program similar to this, because the recidivism rate was very low. And I was a baby, right? I'm tutoring folks, but I remember these people getting out of prison and really having a lot of the same PTSD that I see folks re-entering the workplace post-COVID having. Large crowds overwhelm them. Too much information at once overwhelms them. Having, the cell phone, all the data coming at them with society and cars on the street and people all around and folks talking, overwhelming them. I actually believe that if we study the behaviors of people who are released from being in prison for, a year, 2 years, being in that system that's very structured, that's very isolating at times, that's very, just lots of rules, we would actually see a lot of parallels that are happening in the workplace. And then we may actually be able to create certain adjustment policies, protocols, support services as people are matriculating back into the workplace, because folks are going through things. Like, you're not sheltering in place for 2+ years all alone or with your closest 2 to 4 people, around you. And there are no consequences for a communal people. It's not reasonable. And so I just think that we should be more thoughtful and patient and kind in bringing people back, but I also think it's necessary in most environments for people to come back, because being apart in this virtual environment also stoked a lot of suspicion, also stoked a lot of, gossip, and other unhealthy behaviors that just erode at culture, that erode at harmony in the workplace harmony.
Yeah. I love how you said that. So, okay, last question. What would you say are some best practices or ideas that you might suggest to businesses to help improve inclusivity in their environment? Just to bring people together and improve that workplace culture.
To improve inclusivity, I mean, every organization, like I said, every ecosystem, they have their own thing, their own way of getting business done. There's no 2 work environments we've ever gone into that were identical or even 80% similar to another organization. So I would say this: ask yourself this question. Who's being left out? Like, sit down and ask yourself, the last time we made decisions, how do we include the general workforce who would be directly impacted by the decision? And what I'm not saying is, let's be very clear, I do HR work. I'm not saying don't make the decision, don't make the call as a leader. I'm not saying every decision is made by a majority vote, right? In this democracy.
Right.
I'm not saying any of those things. That would make for a terrible work environment. I've never seen it work successfully. What I am saying is that you can bring people in and invite their perspective so that you can to help you make an informed decision, right? And that means the world to adult workers, right? Folks know that you're the boss, you make the calls, but are you engaging me along the way, or are you just, making decisions from on high? So ask yourself, who's missing from the conversation? How do you thoughtfully design a process where they're not at every decision that's being made, because it would not be appropriate, it would not be efficient and, or effective to govern that way. But you can bring them in and give some feedback and take in some feedback. The second thing, and this will be my last piece, the second thing I would say is, how are you accessing leadership? How are you accessing your workforce? And I'll end with a story. I've got one client who has a company, they mostly engineering, they do they build bridges and things of that nature. And they have locations throughout America. We did a culture assessment with them where we interviewed their workforce and, what do they like? What don't they like, et cetera. And, we do dozens of culture assessments every single year. And with this particular company, they had the most positive culture assessment. And I knew that they weren't cooking the books, because sometimes people try to manipulate. I knew that they were not cooking the books because it was hundreds of people that we had engaged with. And so I remember going to the leadership team when I was giving my presentation, and I said, hey, I never get to say this. The workforce really loves the leadership team. Here are some of the glowing remarks that they shared. What are you doing that makes them trust you from miles and miles away, that makes them trust you and believe that you believe and have their best interests at heart? You believe in them and have their best interests at heart. And the head of operations said, our CEO, we understand that he's a very charismatic leader. So we make it once a month, he goes to a team virtually. This is before it was cool to be virtual, right? Virtually, he hears from the team and takes in their information and shares some information to their team as well directly from him. And they have this anonymous chat. He responds to all the questions. But most importantly, when they ask him questions he doesn't know the answer to, or ask for some additional information, he follows back up 10 times out of 10. And he does that only once a month for each of the different pods. And he's been doing it for years. That in and of itself made him so in relationship with his probably 2,000-3,000 person workforce. So I would ask, when you think about inclusion and inclusivity as a leadership, how are you thoughtfully reaching out and touching, not physically touching, don't touch people, right? HR is not telling you to touch people, but in the spirit, connecting with your workforce in a way that makes them see that and know that you care enough to spend the time, hear from them, and follow up. That's inclusivity. That's inclusion.
Absolutely. I lied. I didn't realize I had one more question I wanted to ask you, just thinking about the future. In your personal or professional opinion, where do you think things are headed in this space of DEI work? And, do you think we're getting closer or further away from having these values that we're talking about really embedded in our culture?
Oh, man. And this is a great question. I actually was just at the Portland Business Journal breakfast thing. I was on a panel.
This morning, right? Or yesterday?
This morning.
Yeah.
This morning. And there were some DEI pros who were just having this conversation. I believe that a few things happen with diversity, equity, and inclusion. DEI has been in existence since the late 80s. But in 2020, there was this crescendo. There was this urgency, this energy associated with diversity, equity, and inclusion. And there was a lot of growth that occurred, right? A lot of people hired, a lot of teams were established, a big response to the market.
Everybody had to have a DEI committee. You had to have a statement on your website. Yes.
Everybody, right? And you needed to bring in a contractor to do it. And you needed to talk about what did it mean for you. All the things were happening. Do you remember when coding was all the rave, and you couldn't, coders were making $300,000 a year? You couldn't find one. You were stealing all the coders from other coders. Everybody wants to be a coder. it's a very similar dynamic to what happened in diversity, equity, and inclusion. Like right now, coders are still important, value adding, but they get paid between $15 and $22 an hour. They're no longer making $300,000 an hour. I think that the market adjusted to DEI and the groundswell that happened in 2020 to 2023 is as well. It is adjusting. But remember, diversity, equity, and inclusion is personal to people. It's not like coding in that way. Right. So when people invested in DEI, it felt like they were investing in them and their families and their lineage and their experience, which can run not parallel with the market. So I think the market started to adjust to there being a saturation of diversity, equity, and inclusion efforts that were going on. And then people are seeing that adjustment as them saying, I don't value diversity, equity, and inclusion. I don't value what DEI brings to our work environment or to the world. Now, there is some of that that's happening. There are a lot of legislation that's happening in different parts and pockets of the United States of America. It's going up to all the way up to the federal Supreme Court. But I don't believe that that's most organizations that were committed to diversity, equity, and inclusion. I think that they're just trying to adjust to what makes sense on an ongoing basis, now that they've done some of the infrastructural work to continue to move forward diversity, equity, and inclusion, and to take into consideration their business, the market, and all of those kinds of things. But I think it's a hard time right now for DEI professionals. A lot of teams are being reduced down. I think it's a hard time for DEI people who are proponents of DEI, because a lot of folks are saying that diversity, equity, and inclusion has been harmful. I think there were some reckless things that happened on the DEI front. A lot of people, calling people out and using, radical candor. I can't tell you the number of times that book was quoted to me, where people literally felt like they could say whatever they wanted to you because they were, exercising radical candor and living into diversity.
Not radical candor.
That is not it, right? That's reckless, and it's going to get you fired.
Reckless candor, that's right.
Reckless. Ooh, we could write a book on that. Just testimonials of reckless candor. But I think all these things were happening, and they're all happening right now. And I think that the reductions are going to slow down. I think that people are really going to get their finger on the pulse of what diversity, equity, and inclusion really means to them, how to integrate it and embed it in material ways into their company.
Yeah, because do you think people were just checking a box, and maybe those are the organizations that weren't truly going to live out those values, that they were just saying, okay, well, we did that and now we can move on. And this needs to be embedded and alive and well in your workplace environment, right?
Think about it like weight loss. Think about it like weight loss, right? And this is not to trigger anybody. Hopefully, I'm not triggering anyone with this weight loss analogy. You can say, let's say Serilda wants to lose 10 pounds, right? Maybe 20, who knows? And I do, carb free meets Jenny Craig meets, I don't know, whatever the fad or the wave is, right? How long will that last?
Right.
It doesn't mean that I don't care about my weight loss. I am committed to and I care about it, but I'm looking for this instant fix. I'm looking for this thing that's going to get me snatched in time for my, reunion or whatever
really
the situation.
Is that lifestyle change, right?
What you needed was a lifestyle change. What you needed to do was eat leafy, work out, eat some more leaves and roughage and whatnot, and more rabbit food, which is not my jam. I like Doritos, right? What you needed was this long-term strategy and plan. And I think that is how things are transitioning right now. We're getting out of the fad, right? Out of the Jenny Craig's, out of the, whatever the app was you were using. And we're really saying, like, from a lifestyle standpoint, how do we want to feel? What kind of life do we want to live? What do we want the longevity of this effort to be? And that shift is happening. I believe it's happening. It's not happening everywhere, right? Some folks are going to constantly be on a yo-yo. Exactly, a yo-yo diet of DEI. But most who really believed in this, and I think that there were a lot, are literally trying to figure out, how do we change our lifestyle of doing business in a way that materially gets outcomes that we can be proud of?
Yeah. Wow. I think that's an amazing place to end. And listeners, I'm sure you felt Serilda's energy. It's infectious and contagious. every time I get to talk to you, I am like just so full of joy. You fill people's cups. I think what a phenomenal champion you are of the work that you do. Workplace Change, look up her website, give her a call. She's a phenomenal person just to hang out and get to know. And I'm so grateful for your time. And I can't wait to see you sometime soon.
Thank you, Reegan. Thank you for having me.
Thank you for listening to Arnerich Massena's podcast. Please see the podcast description for important copyright and disclaimer information.